Greetings everyone, I'm Braulio Bolaños and this is the new edition of One Unit in Less Than 10 Minutes. We're going to talk about a lot of topics today, so let's get started. So the first topic that we are going to talk is about relative clauses. We use relative clauses to give more information in the same sentence without making another one. It makes the sentence a more fluent way to express itself. So first of all, how do you make relative clauses? We have a clear example here about what can be converted to relative clauses. A boy is talking to Richard. Do you know that boy? If we use the relative clauses to change the way that a sentence is made, we could use both sentences and make a new one that is more fluent. In the second example, we have the correct use of relative clauses. Do you know the boy who is talking to Richard? In this case, we use the who to determine the union between the first sentence and the second sentence. In this case, we are using relative pronouns. We are using the relative who to determine who is the person that is talking to Richard, instead of saying two sentences about recognizing the person, then asking for information of the person. Who can be used as an object or as a pronoun for a person, which is a subject or a pronoun for animals and things. Also, it can be used for different things. It can also be used to refer to a previous sentence, like separating two sentences with a which. In this case, whose it can be used for possession of person, animal, or things. In this example is, do you know the girl whose mother is a teacher? Whom is an object pronoun for people. In this case, it is used for non-defining clauses. We're going to talk a little more about that in a little bit. In the other hand, we have that is the opposite to whom. It's used for defining relative clauses. We can use an example of that, saying that I don't like the lamp that stays in the corner of the room. So we were talking about subject pronouns, object pronouns, but what's the difference? How can you differ from one or from the other? Actually, we cannot differ from the word whom, that, it, which. We have to find another way to look out to the difference. So the key to differ from the subject and the object is by looking for the keyword after the relative clause. If it's a verb, it's a subject. If it's not a verb, it's not a subject, so it will be an object. So we have two examples. The first one is the computer, which is lying on the table. Another one that is the computer which Daniel lay in the table. Now we're going to talk about relative adverbs. We have two examples right here. In the first one, we can see that it used the word which, and in the second one, it used where. So relative clauses can be used to say the position or the ambient where the noun is related. So we have three main forms of the relative adverb. That is when, where, and why. Each one depends on the way that you are using the sentence. So the first one is when, it's only about time expression. The second one is where, that refers on position or maybe a space, you could say it. The last one is why. It only refers to the reason of the event. So having all of them, we could express everything that we want, saying the place, the time, and the reason why it happened. So we finally reached the defining relative clauses. Those terms define more details about the information given in the sentence. They are not put on commas, and we could differ them from non-defined relative clauses by the commas and by the ambient of the sentence. And about non-defined relative clauses, they give more information about the sentence, about the topic, but they don't define what's happening in that moment. They don't define the object directly as the counterpart that is defining relative clauses. So the first part of this topic is about using modal verbs to indicate obligation. So using a strong obligation, the person that is hearing or the person that is referred has no opportunity to stop the action. Here we have the list of the modal verbs that are used for a strong obligation. The first one is will. We can use will to predict the future, something that it's guaranteed. So if we say you will stop that noise right now, it will be. The second one is shall. As we saw in the trilogy of the Lord of the Rings, it must say that something is not going to happen. In the third one, we have must, that is an action that is required to be done. An example could be, you must run away. The fourth one is may not, that is a negation of capability of doing something. You may not arise from the below. So that was the list of the ones that are requirements. Now we're going to talk about the necessities, and the list is right here, just below the another one. So we can see that must is again in the list. In this case, about necessity instead of requirement. So it's about saying something that needs to be done before something. Like saying, you must clean your room before going out. In the tier one, it says may not and cannot. It's a condition. You could say you cannot find any newspaper in the afternoon. You need to find them in the morning. The next part of the topic is about suggested obligation. The hearer has the possibility to negate the action or accept to happen. We have here should and ought to. Those are the main forms of suggesting obligation. An example would be anyone who wants to be president should have his head examined. So, in this vocabulary madness, the 5 words that we are using in the first topic of crime and justice are corruption, controlled substance, assault, fraud, and evasion. You can be prosecuted for bribery and corruption. Then you can have possession of a controlled substance. Then you can make an violent assault. You can make a credit card fraud, and you can be accused for tax evasion. Those 5 things are really wrong. Remember that a forged passport is fake, and you can be detained for that. Also, they're going to put you some handcuffs, and they're going to check if you are not smuggling something in the prison. You're going to keep your hands for yourself. And remember, if you are suspicious of something, they can arrest you. But if they make an allegation of something that you made, they cannot arrest you for that moment, just right now. And remember that you keep your stuff when you are being held in custody, but when they convict you, you lose everything until they release you, like 6 months or maybe 20 years. So keep that in mind. Remember that showing evidence in court is different than giving a testimony. A testimony can persuade the jury, but evidence is a proof that you are not guilty, or maybe that you are guilty. Also remember that if you plead guilty, they're going to give you less years than if they find you guilty. But if you're not guilty, just keep that in mind.